Hello and welcome to Industry Today, the podcast powered by MTC Events. My name is Lauren Chambers and I am very excited to be here today for a special bonus episode of the podcast as we mark International Women in Engineering Day. Founded by the Women's Engineering Society and now in its 12th year, International Women in Engineering Day aims to shine a spotlight on the amazing work that female engineers from all around the world do every single day. This year's theme is Together We Engineer, and we have someone with us today who has been flying the flag for women in engineering for many years now. Kirsty Davies-Chinnock is celebrating her 36th anniversary in UK manufacturing, which is an amazing achievement, Kirsty. Today she is Managing Director of West Midlands-based manufacturing firm Professional Polishing Services. She's a Director of the British Stainless Steel Association. And when she's got some more time, she is the founder of the Women with Metal group and the Women in Industry podcast, which I believe has just completed its third series. Yeah. So podcasting is certainly a world that Kirsty is very used to. So massive welcome to the podcast, Kirsty, and thank you for taking your time out of what is a very busy schedule to be here. I know this subject is something that is very close to your heart and you're very, very passionate about. What brought you into manufacturing? Obviously, the world of manufacturing looked very different in the mid to late 80s. So why manufacturing for you, and why is this conversation so important?
I think, like a lot of people in manufacturing, men and women, I got into manufacturing purely by accident. So I joined professional polishing for 6 weeks in between college courses. And it's been a really long 6 weeks, quite frankly. But it was purely by accident. But when I started, I could almost hear the little dial sort of clicking in my brain. It was like I was unlocking a safe and it just went click, click, click. And I was like, I get this. I understand this. And what in a lot of ways was theoretical became reality. And I've been so lucky to have a career in a fantastic sector and see more and more women come through into the sector, both in metals, which is, you know, where I'm based, but also the wider manufacturing. And I think women bring so much to each sector they work in. As the decades have gone by and more of them have joined, it just gives such a better, well-rounded thought process for anything, because we think differently to men. So the discussions that we have and the solutions we can bring to problems by working together and having that diversity of thought is just fantastic.
So you've seen the sector evolve and more women come into the sector over the 36 years that you've been working in it. How do you think women are represented now in UK manufacturing?
There has been a push over the last few years to really celebrate and make women in the sector much more visible. Mm-hmm. There have been some great programmes. The Women's Engineering Society, I'm a member. Yeah, their conference earlier this year was fantastic. But I started Women with Metal, and then the Institute of Manufacturing at Cambridge have done a Women in Manufacturing conference, which was held here at MTC. And it's really about giving women in manufacturing a platform. And the more that they're seen, the more that we're going to encourage younger people to join the sector. And we need people to join the sector.
I was going to say next, do you think there is a bias around certain roles that women fit the mould for in manufacturing?
Yes and no.
Okay.
I think over the years, automation has been fantastic. Mm-hmm. So back in the dark ages when I first started, one of our door polish and sheet lines would have 3 men on it. Mm-hmm. Someone getting the material from the pallet onto the ingoing conveyor, someone running the polishing machine, and someone at the end of the outgoing conveyor getting it onto the pallet. And then we put automation in, pick and place. So it's now one person at the machine. So that means people aren't lifting and doing as much. So there was a perception that it's, if you're in a factory, you're hauling things about, you're lifting this, you're moving that, and you're not now. So that means that it's seen more as a technical, skilled role rather than someone, hauling metal about into a pallet.
The manual element of it doesn't exist in the way that it used to, and therefore
Exactly.
that might be more attractive to women, or they feel like they can potentially fulfill that role.
And also it takes away the bias of going, a woman can't do that, from the hiring manager, who will quite happily take a 16-year-old young man apprentice on, but wouldn't take a 30-year-old woman on, and she's going to be a lot more physically stronger than he is.
Yeah.
But it sort of takes that away. And I think it's 26% of women in manufacturing now, and the majority of them are in sort of white collar roles. And that's fine. But it'd be nice to get the women who want to work in a production capacity being able to do that as well.
Do you think women still feel pressure to fit in a male-dominated environment? Do you think that's part of the challenge, that they feel like they are having to fit into a stereotype, to work in those roles that maybe typically they wouldn't follow?
I think that's really an interesting question. I also think it's interesting if we turn it and say, do we think men are forced into being into a stereotypical role within the workplace, that they've got to be laddish, or they've got to swear, or they've got to make rude jokes, and all things that are really sort of a bit of a stereotypical persona for a man. And most men I know aren't like that.
Yeah.
They might feel they need to do that in a group, but as soon as you've got a group of men together now, they're talking about their families, they're talking about their holidays, decorating the sitting room, the dog they've just got, the cat that they've just got, son's first steps, daughter's first words. They're not, necessarily reading Loaded, as was. So I think the more we can take those stereotypes away, the better it is for women and the better it is for men. Because, they want to talk about their family. They don't necessarily want to go, way, hey, look at the legs on that as a female colleague walks past. They don't want to do that. Very few men do. And I think we're doing a disservice to men, assuming that, and by we, I mean society, assuming that that's, laddish behaviour is the norm, because it's not.
Do you think there is a misconception in the media about how UK manufacturing is perceived? And do you
completely.
think that has a knock-on impact?
Yeah, completely. There really, really is. And we've had decades of sort of being dismissed as an industry because we're dirty, we're noisy, we're low paid. We're not low paid. We're of no use, and, everything's modern now. And the reality is absolutely everything we touch and we consume is down to manufacturing. This building was constructed, the materials it was constructed from were manufactured. Your laptop, the microphone, the glass of water, the sandwich I'll have when I get back to my desk, all of that is because of manufacturing. So we can't not celebrate how great it is, and yet the media traditionally just treats us as like a dirty little secret.
Do you think, therefore, that it's a broader issue, therefore, with how manufacturing is perceived, and therefore, even so, there's lots of initiatives, there's lots of great groups, there's lots of stuff that you do personally to get women to understand what manufacturing means now in 2025. How do we fast track that for people? How do we get people in and get them to recognise, actually, that was manufacturing 40 years ago, this is what it's like now?
I think it needs to be a two-pronged attack. We need to start with school children. And there are some brilliant initiatives who are doing that. So Alexandra Knight set up STEMazing. She's doing some great work. We've got Marvellous Manufacturing that Angela Lawler set up as well. And all of those are then going to give the interest for young people to then go and get an apprenticeship through places like MTC to then go into the sector. But it's making it relevant to young people. And what are they interested in? Are they gamers? Do they listen to music? And if they've got AirPods or earbuds or whatever, what do they think is wrong with that? How does it not work for them? How would they solve it? And the other thing, of course, is over the years, the factory estates have changed. There's not a factory estate at the end of most people's roads anymore. It's out of town. So people aren't seeing it on their doorstep, and they're not so much having the opportunity to go in. And that's why initiatives like Make UK's a manufacturing day, where companies invite local school children to come and see, is also really useful.
So do you think a lot of the onus is on the manufacturers themselves to open their doors and to bring young, and this isn't about just girls and women now, we're talking about just young people in general, aren't we? How do we get more people to be able to see what manufacturing is like? And I guess the manufacturers have a huge important role to play in that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one of the things we've sort of done over the years as an industry is, because we've had very little engagement from government, we've just sort of got on and done it ourselves. It's like, well, no one's listening to us, we might as well just get on and do it. I'd also say in the 80s, we were having these conversations, how do we get young people in? I think apprenticeships are fantastic. There are issues, major issues with them for SMEs, because you'll have some really great companies, perhaps automotive, who'll take on 1,000 apprentices. Well, they're only going to give maybe 30 or 40 of those a job at the end of the period. It's great that they're giving them the opportunity, but an SME who wants 2 apprentices, they're going to give both of those apprentices a job at the end of it. And when there are limited young people coming into the sector, it's like, you know, give us SMEs a chance, please. You know, we're going to give them a job in 2 years. You're not. Let us have some. And that's quite difficult. But that was happening way back in the 80s when Rover were doing it. So, again, it's nothing new. But sometimes I think some of the bigger OEMs don't appreciate the impact it has on companies within their supply chain, and they need their supply chain to keep growing as well.
So potentially younger people are attracted to the bigger names, the bigger brands, inevitably.
Yes.
But something needs to happen to give SMEs the resources, the tools, the platform to shout about their opportunities. Like you say, you're almost certainly going to be able to offer someone a full-time job as an SME if you take on an apprentice, obviously all being well on both sides.
Yeah.
I've actually had a conversation with someone who's going to be on the podcast in a couple of months' time about initiatives that they do with local colleges, where they go into the colleges and they talk about what they do as a manufacturer. They bring people into the factory. And for them, those partnerships are really, really important, building those local partnerships with schools, with colleges, and getting people through the doors and understanding how that works. And one of the things that he talked about, which is interesting on the topic of younger people, is the average age of their workforce is 40. And he said that's really unusual for the type of business that we are, but it's actually a real USP for us. So when we get our potential customers and clients coming in, we sell off the back that we've got these amazing young people coming in, supported by more senior, more experienced people, but getting that balance. And I guess that could be the case for other SMEs as well, if they know how to get people in and through the door in an apprenticeship route like that.
Completely. And one of the things I've done over the years working with organisations is, and I think particularly because I am a woman, is we'll go in and talk to people in colleges or coming to the end of their senior school life and deciding what to do next. And I will go in with my logo and ask them to guess what it is I do. And, you know, I will always go in a dress and heels. So I don't look, you know, they always say, oh, you're a lawyer. I'm like, no, I'm not a lawyer. You're an accountant? No. Think again. And people don't expect you to be in manufacturing.
What's the response when you say what you do?
It's quite funny, actually. 9 times out of 10, the young women are more, oh, what does that mean? What does that entail? And the young men go, how much do you earn and what do you drive?
Right.
So it's good to have those ambitions set early. It really is.
Yeah.
But yeah, the young women are more about the job and the role, whereas the young men are quite often more about the reward
Okay.
and the status.
Yeah.
So it's neither is wrong, but it's just quite interesting that I've seen that disparity on a few occasions.
That is interesting. You mentioned apprenticeships earlier. Have you had apprentices in your business?
We've had apprentices forever.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have one of our senior sheet operators has been with us 30 years now, and he started when he was 15.
Wow.
So, yeah, he did a YTS at 15.
Amazing.
So we took another one on earlier this year, and he's decided he doesn't actually want to do the academic side of it.
Mm-hmm.
So we've changed his title to a trainee rather than apprentice. And instead of doing a formal apprenticeship, what we're doing is doing industry training. So he's had training courses from the British Stainless Steel Association. He's just literally a couple of days ago passed his counterbalance forklift truck licence. We're then going to get him on a course for overhead cranes. He's going on a first aid course. So we're fine, and that's whilst being trained internally as well. So we're like, right, okay, we're just going to keep sending you on courses that you are interested in going on. That's going to benefit you and us. Because a lot of the apprenticeships don't actually translate to the day job. It's great for people to go and learn and have a basic understanding of engineering, but when they're not going to use those skills in the day job, what we don't want is for them to be discouraged and feel, well, there's no point me learning that because I'm never going to use it.
Yeah. Are the majority of your applicants for apprenticeships male?
Yes, we have had a young woman apprentice in the past as well.
Yeah. It sounds like it's still not specifically to your business at all, but still not quite resonating with those younger people younger women, I should say, to follow that route. How do you think we do that? How do you think we get there? How do you think we get the younger women interested and proactively looking to apply for those roles?
We've taken on 4 people over the last few months, and it's worked out that 2 have been men and 2 have been women.
Okay.
And we've had 1 man and 1 woman in the production team, and we've had a woman in the office and then another man in the production team. So we, as a company, are at 32% women now. How do we attract younger women? I think we need to give them a clear, defined career path. The world is changing and the generations are changing with it. You know, what worked for me as a 17, 18-year-old isn't going to work for a 17 or 18-year-old now, and it shouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm seeing when I'm talking to younger people is they want to know, right, how long will it take me to get to the next level? How long will it take me to achieve that? You know, where can I go in my career? And part of that is about being comfortable in learning new skills and not feeling overwhelmed, learning at a pace that suits them, but being able to progress. Mm-hmm. And they're really excited to see that.
Do you think there is a lack of progression for women in the sector?
I think there has been.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's getting better. I think companies over the last few years are really aware that it's not just about attracting, it's about retaining. I think since COVID, flexible and hybrid working, where it's possible in your role, is a bit of a double-edged sword. You know, it sounds wonderful, but in theory, you'll see companies go, no, we've got loads more women now because they're all in accounts and they work from home because they can look after the children at the same time. And it's like, yeah, no, that's not the win you think it is. It really isn't. So I think, particularly with retaining, if women have had a career break to bring up children, and again, that goes back to maternity leave, you can have up to 12 months, but it's not all paid in full. Can people afford that? That's a privilege if you can take that 12 months. It really is a level of privilege. And I think when women come back from maternity leave, particularly if they've had the long period of time, again, it's about progression. It's like, right, okay, where are your peers at, that you last worked with 12 months ago? Do you want to be there? We're going to carve out some of your day for training, because what we don't want to do is say to a young woman who's just come back after having a baby, do your normal hours, then go and study for that certificate after the baby's gone to sleep.
Whilst being a mum.
Whilst being a mum. It's about making sure that they feel valued, that they can progress, and that they've got the training, the resources and the mentorship to do that. Because a lot of sort of middle manager women I've spoken to, it's like, when I come back to work, I just feel like I'm never going to catch up, and feel forgotten about. So if we can put those resources in for them, then that's going to help with retention.
Do you think there's enough wider support for businesses to do things like that?
No, not at all. Not at all. And even looking at things like breastfeeding, if somebody's breastfeeding and they're at work 8 hours a day, they're going to need to be able to pump and store their milk. You hear so many stories about women standing in toilets doing it, or in the stationery cupboard. It's like, please, come on.
Even now, you still hear those stories.
Hear those stories. And it's like, it's really difficult. You've got to say, when do you need to do that? A meeting room is going to, without windows or a glass door as well, is going to be at your disposal every day for the next 6 months. In 6 months, tell us if you need it for another 6 months. And it's just blocked out, and that is your room, and there you go. And just little things like that, are going to help. But a lot of, particularly SMEs, they might not know that if they haven't got, the finger on the pulse of what they need to legally do. And even if you morally should do it, if legally you don't have to, then, and it's going to cost time, effort and money, it's not going to happen.
And you need these women in these roles to champion more women in the sector. It's a kind of circle, isn't it? If it's not working, then how do you get more women in if more women aren't staying in the sector?
Yeah.
I know you travel quite a lot with work, and you've worked with businesses all over the world. How do you think the UK compares to other manufacturing nations in terms of the role that women play in the sector?
I think that we are doing really well. I would say I talk to companies a lot in Germany, and I would say the UK and Germany are really sort of, over the last 5 years, really trying to work on gender equity in the manufacturing sector. And what was interesting was I heard a presentation by a leading rail company the other day about how they're working on their gender equity and supporting women in their organisation. And this is a huge company. It's like 68,000 employees over 60 countries. And they were going through everything they do, all the initiatives in the UK. And it was absolutely fascinating. And they said that they've got, sister companies in other countries who are going, look, we're 20 years behind you.
Really?
Yeah. So I think there has been a real push to do that. And it makes economic sense. Mm-hmm. I think the one thing we need to think about as an industry is more part-time working to fit in with family life. And I don't know what that looks like, but I was at an event here and was talking to a woman, and they run, I'm sure it was like a jam manufacturing business in Scotland, and they have a twilight shift.
Okay.
So, it's like one parent is at home with the kids doing the school run and everything. Second parent comes home, school run parent goes to work for 4 hours and comes back. Because you don't want to do nights and days because you'll never have any family time together. But doing a few hours is going to help with additional income coming in, and you're not paying a fortune in childcare costs. So, and you're still going out and working. You're working with friends and colleagues. You're having that satisfying, rewarding aspect to your life. And the other thing to look at, I think, is term time working. And by that, I'm talking about big manufacturers. A lot of SMEs could maybe have one person do that, but they couldn't, because we get 5 weeks holiday a year plus bank holidays, and schools are off for 11, 12 weeks.
Doesn't match up, does it?
It doesn't add. It doesn't add up. And I know Amazon have started doing that, and they're advertising that at the moment, that they're doing term time working, and the time you take off is a mixture of paid and unpaid. So there are options. And I think as the younger generations come through, they are looking at a better work-life balance than, Gen X like me. It was a badge of honour to, go, I've not had a day off for 9.5 months and I'm doing 80 hours a week, which is a ridiculous thing to be proud of, quite frankly. But now people are like, no, actually, I want to go to the gym. I want to do this. I want to go travelling. I'm contracted to work 40 hours a week. I'm working 40 hours a week.
Yeah.
As they should do. And we love everyone who puts in that bit extra. And, if they're ambitious and they want to go to the next level, yes, there is going to be additional responsibility and additional time and tasks. But if you're having people you want to come in, do a job, do it brilliantly, and go home and just forget about it, you need to make sure that they've got the right work-life balance. And the fact that the younger generation are actively asking for this, I think it's going to be really interesting when they're in leadership roles.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it becomes a sales tool, doesn't it, for the employer, because actually more and more young people coming in are asking for these. And I think, a few years ago it was maybe kind of not seen as as important as a role as it is now, whereas actually people are recognising this isn't going away. People do want a better work-life balance. They're allowed a better work-life balance. It's not sustainable, like you say, what you were doing kind of 20 years ago, 30 years ago.
Last week.
Yeah, still doing it now. But it becomes a differentiator for the employer. And so potentially what we might see is the kind of more forward-thinking employers that are, looking at what the workforce looks like now and in the next 5, 10, 15 years will offer that, and the ones that don't might fall by the wayside.
And even with SMEs who've got really small teams, like us, you can have flexibility because it's individual. So we have one employee who's fairly young, and he's in a band, and they gig a lot. And if he's got a gig and he's got to travel, on a Friday he'll go, can I leave a couple of hours early or leave at lunchtime? And he's allowed to do that. He won't be marked as absent. It will be authorised absence. Is he going to get paid for it? No, unless he's got holiday and takes it. But he's able to do that because it's really sort of supporting his lifestyle. If someone goes, it's my daughter's nativity play, can I come in afterwards? Yes. Again, that's fine. Whereas, I suppose even 10 years ago, most companies would say you've got to fill in a holiday form.
Yeah.
You've got to do this, you've got to do that. And it's still doable, but it makes it rigid.
Yeah.
And if someone needs to pop out and take an elderly parent to a doctor's appointment, go and do it and come and make the time up, however you want to do it.
Yeah.
We've got one of our polishers at the moment. I turned up the other day and I was like, why is the car here? She doesn't start for another hour. And I asked, and she was like, sadly had to have a dog put down. She said, so I'm just making the time up because you let me have the day off. And I'm like, oh, okay. But somebody going through that, you don't want to be, telling them off for not being at work.
They don't need the additional stress, do they?
Exactly.
Because life is increasingly stressful for people, isn't it, in every way? So do you think COVID had a part to play in that, in how people view flexibility in work? I appreciate with manufacturing, there are a lot of roles you can't do from home, but I guess people's general perception of trusting staff to do a job, not sat at their desk 9 to 5 or making up the time, I feel like that was one of the good things to come out of COVID.
Yeah, I think it's a double-edged sword. Again, I mentioned earlier that some companies are going, we've got loads of women now and they all work from home doing accounts. And I've had that conversation so many times with people. And it's a case of we need to be careful because we risk bringing back the us versus them. It took decades to get rid of the shop floor against the office, and it was on both sides. So now we've got everybody working together cohesively as a team and people not thinking they're better or doing a real job. Now, if we've got people that we're going, you work from home because you're a woman and blah, 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 we're risking bringing gender into it. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm not saying that that's being promoted in any way. It's just something to be aware of. But yeah, you're right. COVID really did sort of bring that in a bit. Now, we need people at machines for the machines to run. But whether they start at 6 and go at 2 if they've got something on in the afternoon, or come in at 10 or 11 because they've got to do something at school, and then come in a bit earlier the next day, as long as somebody knows, it's a lot more relaxed than it was.
And your point around not bringing gender into it, and I know obviously we're here today to talk about International Women in Engineering Day, but when you were talking earlier about the flexibility of parents, you said parents, you didn't say mum or dad. And actually, both roles in whatever relationships people exist in will want that flexibility. So it shouldn't just be a given that the mum gets that, or, the dad might want that, or, whatever the situation is for people at home. I think more broadly, this isn't about gender. This is about providing more flexibility for people to have that balance in work and at home, but still be able to do a job that they do really well.
I think it's great that nowadays you've got so many men invested in being parents because society is telling them they can. It's still not giving them enough equity to do that, and you still get that, are you babysitting? You can't babysit your own kids, or you see a man pushing a pushchair and people go, oh, look, he's a wonderful father, But it's a lot more accepted for men to be a caregiver to their children. I heard a talk by Lee Chambers, who's brilliant at looking at allyship. He runs Male Allies UK. And he was ill and had some time out of his business. He had a tech business. And then once he got better, he was like, I can go back to work now. He's put an interim MD in, and he said he didn't want to. He wanted to stay home with his toddlers for a few years, which he did. And he said the attitude he had from people was like, well, you're going to be bored. You'll have nothing to do looking after 2 toddlers. You'll have nothing to do. That's not going to be, satisfying for you. And he said he absolutely loved it. But he said he had an awful lot of men, normally older men, I think he said, don't want to put words in his mouth, who really couldn't understand it. And he said it was one of the best things he's ever done, which was great. And it's one of those things that when the workplace is better for a parent, if that's the mom, great, but it's also better for the dad.
Yeah, it's the equality piece, isn't it?
Yeah.
So how do you think we get more young people more excited about manufacturing? How do we make manufacturing look fun?
Oh, I'm going to show my age now. Do you remember Tomorrow's World on the television? We used to talk about technology and manufacturing and get excited about it. I love the programs that Stamazing are doing. I love the programs that Marvelous Manufacturing are doing. And I think if we can invest in programs like that for schools, really for young children. And I have a friend called Rebecca Galley, who is the CEO of Tornado Wire. I did a podcast with her in a previous role, and she went to her son's school open day and did like hydraulics with them. And they used water, and she ended up flooding.
Oh no!
the gym. She said it was brilliant. The kids loved it. And just do that. Get involved. It's not easy to do that, and there are lots of hoops to jump through, as there rightly should be if you're going in to interact with young children. But reach out to schools. What aspect of science is Year 6 covering? Are they going to do anything on metals? Are they going to do anything on plastics? Are they going to do this? Does it align with what you know about? Can you go in and show them something in real life? It's not a video, it's not words on a board, it's a piece of metal or something like that.
And by doing that, ultimately making it more accessible will attract males and females. It will attract everyone in that room to be more engaged. So, I know obviously having female-focused initiatives is hugely important, and we've talked about how important visibility of women in engineering is, but actually just making more noise, being more present, being more accessible is only going to be good to get more women into the sector.
Completely.
Tell me about your Women with Metal group.
So Women with Metal is an initiative I accidentally set up in 2023. And I had a conversation with someone who was talking about, there was a golf day here and clay pigeon shooting day there and football match there. And he said to me, there's nothing for the women, Kirst. Can you hold an afternoon tea? And I took it in the spirit of which he meant it. And he hates me telling that story, which is why I never name him, because he goes, I didn't mean that. And that was the Wednesday. And by the Friday, I'd booked Park Regis Hotel in Birmingham and booked 5 speakers. And by say booked 5 speakers, they're all people I knew, and I twisted their arm. And I thought I'd get 30 or 40 people in. We had nearly 100 people there. Wow. And then the next year we moved to the ICC, which was last year. Again, we grew the delegate numbers. And this year we're at the ICC as well. And last year I took it to Aluminium in Dusseldorf, which is the largest aluminium trade show. And I worked with them to do the Women with Metal, the Aluminium Awards, which was fantastic. Amazing. Which was international. We had finalists from all over the world. And that, it sort of started and it's sort of rolling. I've been really, really lucky to meet some fabulous women I didn't know prior to that, and fabulous men, because men are very welcome. So I knew Amy Bird from Countrywide Metals, and she came to my first conference. Then we had a conversation. She said, I've been thinking about doing something for a while in the scrap recycling trade, but I haven't. I'm going to do it. And I was like, excellent. And a very large metals stockholder group, engineering group in the UK, had their first women's conference yesterday, which I spoke at, which was great. So it's more and more is coming through. Yeah. And it's something that I'm just so delighted that, I stepped off the curb and that there were other people going, oh, I'm thinking about doing that. I'm thinking about doing that. Will it go down well? Should I, shouldn't I? How's it going to impact on my reputation? How's it going to impact on my business? And I just went, oh, sod it, I'll do it. And they've done it now. And they've said, well, if she can do it, we can do it. And I just think that's wonderful. I said, it's not about me. It's about me stepping off the curb first so other people can cross the road. I'm quite happy to fall on my face and make an idiot of myself. But the women come along to the conference, they interact with each other, they're doing business with each other as well. And they learn something from the day. The whole point is we're going to put tools in your toolbox that you didn't know. Everything from finance to industry initiatives to allyship in action to emotional intelligence to communication to health, all sorts of things.
Amazing. What advice would you give to a young woman listening to the podcast now that is considering a career in manufacturing in 2025? What would you say to them?
Do your research. LinkedIn is a powerful tool. And if you are looking at an application form to fill out for a role that you're interested in, and it asks for 10 skills and you can only do 6 of them, apply anyway, because that is something we've seen over I dread to think how many decades. Women will wait until they can tick each of those 10 boxes and apply. Men will go, well, I can do 6 of those. I'm sure if, I say I want training in the other 4, I can learn on the job. And so they apply anyway. So apply, say, and look at the other 4 skills that you haven't got. How can you demonstrate that you can learn that? A lot of skills are transferable. Say, I've never done that, but I've done this. Mm-hmm. One of the initiatives that the metal sector is doing is looking at, for customer service and sales roles, looking at employing retail, people who used to work in retail. Because, if you're trying to convince someone over the phone to buy something, somebody who's done it face to face has those skills. They just need to learn a different language for whatever it is you're selling in an industrial sector.
Yeah, like you say, those transferable skills are hugely valuable.
Yeah.
And I guess there's a confidence piece for women, right? They, like you say, they're only going to apply typically if they can do all 10 of those things, rather than just being confident in the fact that they can do 6 or 7 of them amazingly well and they can learn to do those other ones.
Job adverts are, in a way, a shopping list, but I don't think any company is expecting, a carbon copy of that bit of paper to walk through the door. It's about the personality. And over the years, women have been told a lot, imposter syndrome. And it's worth remembering that just because you don't have a skill, it's not because you've got imposter syndrome. If you gave me a clarinet and said, can you play this piece by Debussy, I can't, because I can't play the clarinet. If you give me a clarinet and a music teacher and say, can you come back in 12 months and play that piece by Debussy? Yes, I can. It still might not be very good, but I've had the opportunity to practice and learn. And just because you can't do something, it's not down to imposter syndrome. It's down to you've not had the training. We don't know everything. Every day is a school day. And learning and treating yourself, I heard it referred to the other day as a business. So I'm a business. I'm investing in myself by learning those new skills.
And it's not always on the individual to know how to do that, right? It's spotting those opportunities and those employers that can help you with that.
I think a lot of employers now are looking at more diversity of applicants, not necessarily down to gender or any other characteristics, about diversity of thought. They, if someone comes in who's done their research on the company and only ticks 4 or 5 of those boxes, but is confident they can learn and can go, well, in that role, I did that I didn't know anything about 6 months before. You're much more likely to get given a chance than if you're not looking at that. I think a lot of employers are not blinkered anymore when it comes to the next generation coming through.
Great. Final question for you. What is one bold move that you think the industry could take in making a meaningful difference to get more women involved in the sector?
I think the one bold move they can make is going to be around parents being able to work and look after their children. And that bold move is going to be different for each company, but I think it's going to be around that.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Kirsty. It's been so lovely chatting to you. There's years and years of experience and expertise that you've been able to share. So hopefully there's lots of stuff there that people can take away from the conversation today. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Lauren.
If you would like to learn more about anything we've talked about today, including the initiatives that Kirsty runs and works with, as well as the work of the Women's Engineering Society and also the wider work of International Women in Engineering Day, then please view the show notes available for this podcast. We are back next month for our latest episode. Make sure that you check out our past episodes by searching Industry Today wherever you access your podcasts. Thank you again for joining us and being part of the conversation on International Women in Engineering Day.